What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Wednesday afternoon. A lot to get into on today's episode. We're going to talk about Georgia's second spring scrimmage, what we learned over the weekend. We're going to preview G-Day, which is coming up this Saturday. Maybe make some bold predictions on what the Dogs are going to do between the hedges in Sanford Stadium. We're going to talk about Georgia basketball. We're going to talk about Georgia baseball. We're going to talk about the latest on the House settlement. And we're in the state of Georgia. We got to talk about the Masters, so we're going to do that as well. So follow along with us. Stay on for this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, go subscribe to Dogs 24/7, the YouTube, and also go to our website. A lot of good content. Let's get into the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Wednesday afternoon. A lot to discuss as we are almost to G-Day, boys. Got some practice intel to talk about with the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to preview the spring game, which will be at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. A reminder, can't watch that on TV. You either got to be there or you can follow along with us on dogs247.com. We're going to talk about Georgia basketball, Georgia baseball, update on the House settlement as that continues to be worked on and tweaked. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Masters. And let's start right there, Ben. You were in Augusta on Monday. I know you were super excited. The weather, Mother Nature kind of let you down, but give us the lay of the land, what it was like on Monday.
Yeah, well, it's just an absolutely diabolical move by Kipp to show up to this wearing one of his pieces of Masters gear. I've tried to keep a pretty positive outlook on this whole experience. And what I'll say is this, like the question I have for people, because I can speak very, I wish I had known it was going to be this way, but I can speak very in detail of like, if you were given 2 hours at Augusta National, what would you do in 2 hours at Augusta National? Because I lived that experience. I thought I might have more like 3 to 4 hours. We knew weather was going to be a challenge, but for those that are not in this world and we're not paying attention, I probably wouldn't ordinarily have been paying attention on a random Monday to know what the weather was doing at Augusta. But we find out on Sunday night that they're not going to be opening the gates at 7:30. And so we don't really know what that means. They said check back in at 8, which is a little challenging when you live a couple hours away to know when do you go, when do you not. And so, my parents and my wife, we sort of split the difference on, all right, we don't need to get over there right at 8 in the event that they're not opening doors until 10 or noon or whatever that might look like. But we might as well, try and get over there earlier just in case they open things early. And they turned out to open things at 8, like right on the dot at 8 o'clock. And so we got over there, got parked, got very lucky probably because of the weather and people not knowing when they were going to be able to show up, that there weren't a whole lot of people when we first got there. So we actually had 4 chairs, had them posted up right on the 16th green. We're in probably what would be one of the best spots you could be at on a practice day. But we're sitting there having that thought, like, we don't know how much time we're going to have here, and knowing what the weather forecast was going to be, there's certain things that you want to spend time doing. And so obviously go grab some concessions, wanted to go check out Amen Corner just to see it real quick, come back, sit down, watch. I think we saw one golfer come through and skip on the 16th green. And then my wife and I decided, you know what, we know our time is limited. We should probably get in line for the pro shop if we're going to get gear. And you guys have heard me say it. I've always said it. I've had a lot of friends that have gone to this, and they always ask, you want me to get you something while you're there? I'll shout out our director of recruiting, Tom Loy. He's there right now in the Breckman's place. And he was saying, he's like, I got you, which only, it was sort of like, I'm happy that Tom gets to go enjoy it today, but I'm also just like, Tom, I don't need you adding insult to injury here. But he said, I can get you something. I said, no, I'm always going to wait to be able to check out the store myself. So I'm standing in line when the weather horn goes off on Monday. It's probably a 45-minute line. And, Sarah and I were probably, I don't know, half an hour out from getting in. So it's not like we were like on the precipice of getting in and then we had to leave. We only had to wait for probably 10, 15 minutes or so. But brutal timing that, I don't want to be all woe is me because I got to be at Augusta National. I got to enjoy some of the, treats from the concessions. I got to see 16, see Amen Corner. I got to post up at 16 for a little while in a great spot. My parents have lived in Georgia, since the late 90s, and they've applied for the lottery every year, never gotten it. So this was their first chance getting to see Augusta National too. So sweet first experience in that it's awesome to be at Augusta National and to get to see things that you've always heard of, but also just got cut a little too short. I'm hopeful that what I've heard about, getting auto access to next year's Monday, because now I kind of know, having never done it, I kind of got to do a trial run. I know what I would do in terms of things that I didn't bring that I would have brought, where I would want to prioritize getting to right off the bat to be able to kind of set up shop at. So I feel like I learned some things that I can now apply for hopefully this time next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping for your sake that that's true, because someone else brought up that they thought you'd be able to go next year because of the weather. Kipp, remind me, are you going at all this year? And any tips for Ben when he does get to go?
Well, next year, just right when you get there, get in line for the merch shop. Don't let this happen to you again. I don't care if it's, bright blue skies and perfect weather. Just don't allow any other variables to take control. I actually went last year for the first time and left thinking that they actually had a weather globe over Augusta. So you proved me wrong there. Because I had the exact opposite experience. I would say picking a group of golfers to follow through each hole through the course is a great plan. But once you get to the skip it hole where everyone's just yelling at them to skip the ball across the water, you're not going to want to leave there. It's just so much fun just hearing the group, the crowd yell every single time a golfer comes up, just encouraging them to skip the ball. It's just so much fun. If I hadn't already gone to the merch shop, I would have left with a skip it hat instead of a pimento hat. But if that's going to be my biggest regret, I'm kind of okay with that. And obviously, yeah, man, get that step count in. I was over 20,000 steps. My buddy that went yesterday, he was over 25,000. It's a great way to get a top score for the year. So just going in, you're going to go over double-digit miles walking and have some fun with it.
Yeah, I am. I know it didn't go the way you wanted it to, Ben, but I am jealous. Both of my co-hosts here have been to Augusta, and I have not. So maybe next year I can break through, and we'll finish off this episode today with some Masters picks. So if you want to stick around for that, I would encourage you to do that. But we got other things to take care of first, and we're going to talk about Georgia football. And we're going to start with what we learned from the scrimmage on Saturday. That was Georgia's second scrimmage. That was the last scrimmage before G-Day this upcoming Saturday. We're going to pass along some of the notes, some of the things we learned from that second scrimmage. By all accounts, Gunnar Stockton had a really productive day. I was told that he had 4 touchdowns in that scrimmage and that he played really well. Hit Colby Young for a big touchdown to start the scrimmage. Colby had a good day. Noah Thomas had a touchdown. Ethan Barbour had a touchdown. Heard great things about Jeremy Bell, a walk-on that people have been excited about since he got to Georgia last year. Was told Bo Walker and Chauncey Bowens had touchdowns. They played really well. Continuing to hear good things about Bo Walker in his first spring at Georgia. DeMello Jones had an interception. Elijah Griffin's playing well on defense, which I don't think is a surprise. Did not have Zachariah Branch in that scrimmage. Sounds like he's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring, which will be something we'll have to watch for G-Day. And also interested to see about Drew Bobo's availability. Kirby had told us on last Tuesday, that he had was dealing with a hyperextended knee. So that will be something to watch if Drew Bobo, the starting center, will be available at G-Day. I'll start with you, Kipp. Anything else from that second scrimmage that caught your attention? Anything of note from what we learned as Georgia continues getting ready for G-Day.
It's interesting because we heard that there are a lot of big time plays made by the wide receivers. I mean, you mentioned Jeremy Bell and Dylan Bell and Sokovie White making big plays, having a good scrimmages. But then on the flip side, I've heard Ellis Robinson's just put on, back-to-back weeks of impressive practices between him and DeMello Jones. The cornerbacks have been, really having a strong spring. So it's just kind of interesting that both position groups seem to be doing really well this spring, which definitely bodes well for Georgia. The quarterback play, it's kind of something where early on, it was kind of up and down. Now we're hearing Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi are both just having a great spring. I think that's normal. We said that the defense usually starts out in front, but the game starts to slow down for both of them, and they start to continue to gain confidence. And I think now we look back and think the fact that Gunnar got to get in, how big was that late in that season? Because that confidence carried over. That was the beginning of his spring. So he got an extended spring, and Kirby Smart kind of alluded to that during an interview with 680 The Fan early this week, that that extra experience has kind of paid off for Gunnar. He kind of came in kind of knowing what to expect. And I think you've kind of seen that as far as what we've heard from his performance the last couple of weeks. Instead of up and downs, it's been more ups for him. And so I think overall, some of the question marks with the offense, you're starting to hear more positive feedback from that. And we always talk caution in spring. If any part of the team is doing well, you instantly get the fear from the fans that the opposite group, oh, great, the defense is cooked. So I think it's kind of tough to really, when they're just practicing against themselves, to glean a lot from that. But I do think you want to have the offense, making plays and gaining confidence more than anything. At the end of the spring, you want to go into the summer knowing that some of these playmakers, have the ability to consistently produce against probably still one of the best defenses they're going to face this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Ellis Robinson. Noah Thomas, when we talked to him on Tuesday night, had a lot of praise for Ellis, said that, basically they go back and forth, and that Ellis is a dog, and that, he's going to be giving receivers a whole lot of trouble once we get to the season. Ben, anything stick out to you from that second scrimmage? Anything that really caught your attention from what Georgia did last Saturday?
Well, I found this interesting, like dating back, I guess, to the Tuesday before the most recent scrimmage. I had heard that the defense had a tough day, and that, in fact, I think defensive coaches were, worked overtime, I guess you could say, throughout the rest of the week because of how certain things went on Tuesday's practice. And I wouldn't say that a whole lot changed in terms of what we were hearing coming out of the scrimmage either. And Kipp talked about it a good bit, but I think a lot of this goes back to Gunnar Stockton and just how well he knows the offense, how well he operates the offense. I think that the last week and a half, Gunnar Stockton has been really impressive in terms of what I've been able to gather from my conversations as well. And, I'll be the first to say, I was at the beginning of spring, wondering, is there a quarterback competition that could be going on here? What can Ryan Puglisi do to earn that? And I know that he got a chance to speak with media earlier this week, and really his first opportunity to do that. And so it shows you some signs of, all right, Ryan's at least doing some of the things he needs to be doing as well to be put in a position to be able to be speaking to the media. But it sounds like Gunnar Stockton has really, grabbed hold of this job, and everything that we've heard coming out of the last scrimmage in particular. I mean, I think we've talked about where Gunnar Stockton's strengths are and where you have to build a weaponry around him that is going to help him with that. And I think, he throws a good deep ball. He advances the ball down the field. I think that he made the comment when he spoke to media recently, what's your favorite ball? And he was just like a good go route. That's what he likes. And I think that you've seen with the skill players that they've put around him, there are a lot of people that excel in that area. And I think that they're finding that cohesion that, maybe was lacked at times in the passing offense last year. I think that's what you have to hope for if you're Georgia, that Gunnar Stockton has a relationship with his wide receivers and that his deep ball and their ability to create space and explosives down the field all coexist really, really well together. Like, I think that's the recipe for Georgia's offense to be what people want it to be this year. And hey, if the last week and a half is any indicator, it can be.
And I'll add to what you were just saying, Ben. I think Gunner has been performing well lately, and it kind of really, to me, was so obvious when we were talking to the receivers on Tuesday night. I mean, I do think that Georgia, not only the players, but the coaches, I think they have a lot of confidence in this receiver room. And I think that, I've heard embarrassment of riches when you talk about the receivers. I mean, they are just super deep. Colby Young, Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch, Dylan Bell, Sakovi White, who I've heard has had a phenomenal spring. He's probably not going to be a starter. And I don't want fans to take that as like, he's kind of lost in the weeds. He's behind these guys. I think Sakovi White's going to make a lot of plays. London Humphreys, some of the freshmen, CJ Wiley, Tylen Taylor, they're in really great shape, and they're just super, super deep. I think this is a receiver room where we're going to see a lot of rotation, which we did. I think that would have been the 2023 team, where it felt like they rotated at receiver so much, and it was to their benefit. So I think there's a lot of reason for excitement with this passing game, and a lot is going to be placed on Gunner, but just based on what I've heard and what I've seen to this point, I think he's up for the challenge. All right, let's turn our attention to G-Day on Saturday, 1 p.m. Again, will not be televised, so either buy a ticket to it, listen to it on the radio, or follow along on Dogs 24/7, or do any combination thereof. Going to be, again, an entertaining scrimmage. Based on what Kirby said on Tuesday on the radio, I think we're going to see your traditional G-Day scrimmage. He kind of left the door open to maybe making some tweaks according to injury, but I think they're in good shape as far as that goes. So I want to sort of ask you guys, looking at G-Day, what intrigues you the most? What is the thing you're really going to be focused on in this spring game? And I'll start with you, Kipp. Is there a player? Is there maybe a unit or a position group you're particularly interested in watching when we get to Sanford Stadium on Saturday?
I want to see how consistent Quintavious Johnson is at creating pressure. I think when we're looking ahead to, after G-Day and when this transfer portal opens, that's kind of the position where we're you have to think that Georgia's been evaluating all spring. How do they see this position room? Do they think this room is ready and deep enough to, create havoc on a consistent basis? And it does begin right now with Quintavious Johnson. So if he's out there consistently getting to the quarterbacks, obviously not able to get home and actually take them down. But, if he's tagging and he's in the backfield and plays are getting called, maybe Georgia, isn't feeling as desperate to need to get, an impact guy in the portal. They still might want to address the position as far as depth, but I think he's kind of the key as far as question marks on the roster as it stands right now, because Damon Wilson leaving was a shock. And he had him kind of plugged in there with Quintavious, rotating in. You thought that's still a really solid group. Now it's after him, who is going to be that next guy? So not just him, that position group. I want to see how they do against an offensive tackle group that, you got some young guys mixing in there. Ernest Green it sounded like he had a really solid spring. Bo Hewley mixing in there. We've heard great things on Jaw Jackson, a guy that maybe he might be pushing for that swing tackle spot this fall. How those guys do against these edge rushers will go a long way into how I think Georgia approaches this transfer portal season.
Yeah, watching the trenches really with both teams, and then both sides of the ball, super interested, want to see what they are able to do. And again, that edge position, is sort of the position to watch for Georgia, particularly when we talk about after spring and what they do. Do they go in the portal? Do they not? Do they stand pat? So I think it makes a lot of sense to pay attention there. Ben, what about you? Is there a player? Is there a position you're really keying in on once G-Day gets underway on Saturday?
Well, I hadn't really thought about it until Kipp started talking about it. So I do like just the edge position, outside linebacker, and then also running back. Like I do think that those are two potential transfer positions. So I guess watching those to see, because I think Georgia will probably be trying to determine like are those rooms where they need to be, or do they need to add a body in either or both of those rooms? I definitely think is a conversation. So watching those position groups probably has transfer implications. At the beginning of spring, when I asked some people in the building, like, what are you most curious about or looking for this spring? I won't say the only response I got, but the most common response I got was what happens at safety. Like, I think everyone knows what KJ Bolden is, but when you bring in, and this isn't the first time I've talked about safety this spring, but when you bring in 3 transfer portal guys at safety, who emerges? Does somebody that was already on the roster take that as enough of a personal slight that they, do everything that they need to do this spring, that they actually take hold of that? Like, I think you think about, all right, Jaden Harris has a lot of experience playing big time football. Adrian Maddox has really impressive build. Zion Branch probably has a chip on his shoulder of his own, just because he always gets kind of thrown in as the add-on to Zachariah Branch. And so, it's interesting, the 3 that they ended up bringing in, but then you've got a guy in Ja'Cory Thomas that's been here, that has been in the conversation. It's like, I doubt that Ja'Cory Thomas just sees 3 transfer guys come in, decides on his own, accord to stick around when he could have easily gone and looked around other places as well, and has approached this spring any way other than, I'm going to prove why I am the best option, even compared to all of these transfer portal guys that you bring in. And so it's going to be the first time that we can really take a look. I don't know offensively how vanilla Georgia is going to be to try and attack these safeties, but I think that if you want to get an opportunity to see how all of these guys perform in Sanford Stadium with fans around, like, I don't know about y'all, but I would probably dial up a game plan to expose everyone as best as I possibly can to try and figure out what you really have at safety in that environment. So that's probably what I'll be watching the most closely. And then, of course, the freshmen. Any freshman that make a big play, everyone's going to have decided they're a future All-American. So I'm excited to see, who that is. I know Elijah Griffin will do some things. Maybe CJ Wiley, Talon Taylor, Elias Williams, like some of these guys that are more physically ready. They do something cool on Saturday. I mean, we're never going to hear the end of it from fans.
But it's going to help us through, April all the way to August, which is music to our ears. We want to keep the people talking over on Dogs 24/7. Ben took the big one for me, which was safety, because Kirby has talked about no one's really separated themselves. And I know you might hear that and maybe panic, but I honestly think it's a situation where, okay, Adrian Maddox had a really good day. Oh, okay, Ja'Cory Thomas has had a good day. I don't think it's necessarily, oh man, we really need someone to step up. I just think you're looking for that consistency. So to see how they play is important to me. And the other one that I think one of you guys mentioned, running back, and it's really the whole group. We know Nate Frazier, and we know that he proved himself last year, but again, this is going to be his first G Day. How does he play? Everybody's going to pay attention to his ball security. Can he hold on to the football? Does he have any issue with fumbles? And then elsewhere, I think you just kind of work your way down the list. Chauncey Bowens, it sounds like, has really practiced well in the last few weeks. They need someone to step up, given that I highly doubt we're going to see Branson Robinson or Roderick Robinson. They may go through pregame stretches. I feel like Georgia's done that in past years. Some of these injured guys, get them in uniform, let them kind of warm up, but then they're going to watch from the sideline. So can Chauncey, take advantage? Can Dwight Phillips Jr. get involved and maybe make some plays? Can Bo Walker add to what's been a very impressive start to his Georgia career? Cash Jones, who I feel like we routinely will not list when we're talking about running back, and he's the third down back and a guy that, we talked to him on Tuesday night, and he talked about how much confidence he has now at this point in his career and, want to go out there and help this room and be that veteran in the room. Cash will probably get some run as well. So, yeah, running back to me is very important. And it sort of goes against what Ben was just talking about. If they go out there and dial it up, you might not see quite as much from the running backs. Or if Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo decide, look, let's not go crazy. We'll take a few deep shots, but let's let these running backs go to work, we might see quite a bit from several of these running backs, and it'll be worth watching to see if they take advantage. All right, before we turn the page from G-Day and previewing the game, again, we'll have plenty of coverage and plenty of stories leading up to G-Day and also after it, and we'll do our post-game podcast on Saturday as well. We're going to give you guys an opportunity to give a bold prediction from Saturday, and I'll start first so you guys can kind of let the wheels get going. And I'm going to say Bo Walker has 2 touchdowns on Saturday. I really like what we've heard about the true freshman. I see this as a great opportunity for him to grab that running back 2 spot. And I'm always so hesitant when it comes to true freshmen and saying, oh, they're going to get in the mix right away, because we know the experience Georgia has and the talent Georgia has. But you're looking at a team that just last year had Nate Frazier step up in a big way because he proved he was ready, and he proved that they could count on him and that he would make plays. So I think that Bo Walker is going to have a good G-Day, find the end zone twice, and probably be someone that the folks over on the Junkyard talk about from now until the Marshall game gets underway. So I'll go to you, Ben. Give us a bold prediction for G-Day.
Torn between 2, but I have had a conversation today with someone that's been at 2 practices this spring, and that both times they've been at practice that KJ Bolden had multiple interceptions during the course of that practice. So my prediction is going to be that KJ Bolden forces a turnover at some point during G-Day. I think that it is probably not discussed enough just how valuable KJ Bolden is going to be to this defense, and how crazy it is in retrospect, and how close it was that Georgia was to not even having KJ Bolden on this roster, and how pivotal he's been for not just last season, but also this season. So I'll say that he makes a big play. There was another one I wanted to make on the offensive side, but I don't want to take one away from Kipp. So I'll just say KJ Bolden forces a turnover.
I like that one, and I can't remember if it was the first scrimmage or the second scrimmage, but we were told that Kirby was really riding KJ Bolden, like really pushing him, and I think that's a positive sign. He has a lot of confidence, and they want to, they want KJ Bolden to step up in that secondary, and I think he's totally capable of doing that. I really like that pick, Ben. Kipp, what about you? Give us a bold prediction.
The biggest explosive of the day comes from Jaden Riddell. I think he's coming off a strong scrimmage. Obviously, you got your top 2 tight ends coming back, and Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky. But he's going into that, 3rd tight end role, and it's a very different look going from, Ben Urosic to Jaden Riddell and what he brings to the table. He's definitely the freakiest tight end in that position room. And I'm including, some ridiculous players in that room, including Elias Williams, guys that they brought in. But I think that he is kind of starting to put it together. And I think just the potential for him is just at a different level than the other guys at tight end for Georgia, a room that we've called probably the deepest, most talented in the country. And I think that given the opportunity on Saturday, he is going to be able to, just get away from coverage and make a big time play. So my prediction is that the longest play from scrimmage actually goes to Jaden Riddell, and that's knowing that Georgia's got athleticism across the board at running back and wide receiver. But I'm going to give it to him to break one, and let's see if he can come through for me.
Ben, do you want to offer up that other bold take you were pondering there?
Yeah, I don't think it's probably not that surprising given what I talked about in the previous segment, but I think Gunnar Stockton's going to be the MVP of the day. I think that Georgia benefits Georgia in many respects to probably have their quarterback have a really good day at G-Day. I know it's not going to be televised in the same way, so there's probably less optics concerns that there are to previous G-Days, but I do think that Georgia having really sound quarterback play, or the feeling of sound quarterback play going into the season, is going to be really important. I think proving that the receivers can catch passes down the field and you can create explosives, and that can be exciting, I think is something that Georgia is going to press the issue on. And to my point earlier, I think that they're going to want to attack that secondary to figure out, who needs to be playing cornerback 2, who needs to be playing at safety. And so I think Gunnar Stockton is going to be put in some situations, probably some favorable situations based on play calling as well, just to, put that secondary maybe on their back, on their heels a little bit, trying to, put them in some disadvantageous situations. I think that I like Gunnar Stockton's stat line by the end of the day on Saturday.
Probably a good pick, and I know just for the sake of the fans, if he has a strong game, everybody's going to feel a lot more comfortable going into the offseason, the rest of the offseason. Whereas if he struggles, buddy, probably would be good news for us because the message board would just be one thing after another. But no, I like that pick and something to watch. Before we take a break, I did want to answer this question from YouTube, John Fork, what we thought about Talon Taylor. Really talented receiver. I believe it was the first scrimmage of the spring. He had a big explosive from Ryan Puglisi. He's a guy that I do think is going to be in the mix. Now, again, we talked about how deep the receiver room is, how hard it's going to be to find playing time. I like the progression he's made. CJ Wiley we've heard about. I think Landon Rollins made some plays over the course of spring too. So I think there's plenty of reason to be excited about Talon Taylor while also acknowledging, man, this receiver room is incredibly deep. It is going to be hard for some of these guys to really carve out a lot of playing time, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that Talon's a guy that's capable, but he's still got a ways to go, as do the rest of these freshmen. Ben, any thoughts on Talon Taylor?
I mean, he's an impressive player. I'm with everyone else that is excited about him. I mean, he does, his one cut route running, the quick twitchiness with which he moves, whether that be when, getting rid of defenders or whether that be making plays on the football. Like he's a special athlete. I haven't seen him since January, in person. So I don't know what his, what the weight room has done for him over the course of those 2 months. Like he's someone that could have definitely benefited from adding some weight. And I'm curious to see what that has looked like this spring. But to your point, Jordan, I think it all comes down to just how competitive this room is. Like it's going to be very easy to get lost in the shuffle right now because there's so many capable bodies in that room. He's someone that I imagine will have to find a way to break through the rotation at some point this year, just based on his ability, how heavily recruited he was, and just, Georgia's looking for dynamic athletes at receiver, and he's one of them.
Kipp, any thoughts on Talon Taylor?
He's been drinking from the water hose all spring. So, it's okay to not hear anything about some of the freshmen. He was playing, I mean, no offense to any other state, but he's playing, Illinois competition before. Now he's going up against Ellis Robinson, DeMello Jones in practice. It's okay that he's maybe not stringing together dominant practices yet. And it's just a reminder that the Georgian coaching staff has a job to develop players. And sometimes players get better in year two, which is why, a guy like Sokovia White is probably taking snaps right now from London Humphreys, guys that are older than him. So I do think that you have to show some patience and a little bit of restraint, which is impossible as a fan. It's always about the freshman. It always will be. But you're going to hear about him. He might not go out there and make a lot of big plays early, but he's got to have some time in the system. And it's frustrating because you do see some offenses out there that just throw guys out there. It's single read offenses. They're easy to pick up. Georgia's trying to get guys ready for the NFL, and it does take longer. And I do think that, I think Talon's going to be a guy that second half of the season going to next season, everyone's talking about him. But I do think the depth of that receiver room is a good thing, that you're going to let the more experienced guys, the guys that have developed, make plays early on, knowing that Georgia's playing 15 to 17 games, these guys are going to get hurt. And there's going to be plenty of opportunities for him to step into a much bigger role, and they're going to need him to.
We're going to take a quick break. Before we do that, I want to tell everyone who is watching to make sure and go subscribe to Dogs 24/7, especially right before G-Day, as I mentioned, that you won't be able to watch it. So if you want to follow along and you are not there in Sanford Stadium, you'll want to go to Dogs 24/7. We'll have the live thread and a lot of good coverage there. 50% off a VIP membership right now. Great time to close out spring, continue following recruiting, which we only know is going to heat up in the weeks to come. We'll have Georgia baseball coverage, continuing to follow Georgia men's basketball coverage as they put their team together for 2025-26. So could not encourage it enough. If you like this show, please go subscribe to Dogs 24/7, 50% off, a great time to get in. We're going to take a break, come back and talk about the latest on the House settlement, Georgia men's basketball, and Georgia baseball, and the Masters, of course. All right, guys, Monday was a big day in the talks about the House settlement in the NCAA and the future of revenue sharing. It's something that Ben and I talked about at length on Thursday's Stay Wolk podcast. And just to get everybody up to speed on what happened, no settlement approved quite yet. Judge Claudia Wilkins pointed out a few things that she wanted cleaned up before she would approve of the settlement, including the talk about roster limits. She wants to see that phased in, kind of grandfather in the current walk-ons that are on these teams. And then the other part of the conversation was, this would be a 10-year agreement in this settlement. She sort of wants to see that be revisited every year, basically so new athletes can kind of come to the table and be part of the conversation instead of them already basically being spoken for the next 10 years. Ben, we again talked about this quite a bit on Thursday. I know all three of us have been following this closely. What did you think of what we learned from Monday and where things sort of stand going forward?
Jordan, I actually want Kipp to go first on this. I want him to be able to get a word in on this before I say anything on it.
Yeah, you have been talking quite a bit on this episode, so we'll let Kipp go first.
I mean, it's been over a decade in the making. I remember 2013-14, we were talking about $5,000 stipends. And now, amateurism is no longer the topic at all. And I think that colleges thought Monday was going to be when this was all accepted. I think they thought, they made plans thinking Claudia Wilkin, the U.S. District Judge, would accept it because she kind of approved it back last fall, gave it the early preliminary approval. So everyone was rushing to get deals in, especially basketball programs. I mean, they want to get those deals in during, this is a big time for them. They're trying to get them in. College football programs are trying to get those, the early ones that would take in effect in July. And, Claudia heard everyone and kind of just doesn't believe that as it stands, this is going to provide equal opportunity, and kind of questions a lot of what was brought to the table. Heard a lot of different arguments from other athletes. And I think that she'll ultimately approve this maybe next week, maybe later this spring. But I think you heard enough to maybe question whether this is still going to work. I don't think this is going to solve the problems that college football has. Players are going to get better and better deals. They're going to get, the NIL isn't going to shrink. These caps, I don't think it's going to do a thing. You're still going to have a combination of schools and collectives, and salaries are going to skyrocket. And I just think that university presidents are naive in thinking it's going to go any other way. They're not going to, boosters are not going to stop just because, the school has a $20.5 million cap, and we're going to see lawsuits immediately whenever, these deals fall through. You think Phil Knight is going to accept being told that he paid, above fair market value for a quarterback that that Oregon is trying to get? I don't think so. So I don't think this is going to ultimately work, but I do think, Congress isn't going to bring anything as far as antitrust. They're not going to help. I just think that you're going to have more legal issues moving forward. And even though that they had 6.5 hours in that Monday's hearing, it was a huge, colossal moment for college sports in general. But I don't think this is where it's going to stop. I think we're going to have a lot of movement down the road from this.
The one thing that I did appreciate from the sort of waiting to make more adjustments, I do think she's on to something with the roster limits of like, okay, it does, to me, it doesn't make a ton of sense that you've got to cut 20 or 25 guys before the first game this year. I mean, because again, as much as we kind of laugh at amateurism and the student athlete part of this, I mean, these are guys that, I imagine if they got cut, they'd still stay. Like guys on Georgia's team would probably still stay at UGA at least through the fall. So I think that piece to me makes the most sense of like, well, let's grandfather in the people that are already here, and then understand that maybe next year's team, those are the numbers you got to hit. Ben, you've been such a gracious co-host on this episode. I want to let you talk about this. I know it's something very important to you. Just what you make of this situation.
Well, we don't have a super clear answer on what exactly the ruling is going to be. Like, it feels like behind the scenes, everyone is operating as if they think it's trending towards approval. But as Kipp brought up, like the judge stated certain things that she maybe takes issue with, or that she's, sees one side versus the other. I know that there was some conversation about like breaking down some of the pieces of the settlement into separate parts, because like just blanket approving the entire thing doesn't feel realistic. I think the timing of when an approval happens is going to be critical here, because, at this point, I would probably just recommend don't have anything be approved until after the transfer portal window closes, because I feel like if this happens, if the ruling happens right in the middle of the transfer portal window, or like the second before the transfer portal window opens, it could cause even more chaos than there's probably already going to be. And so I think the timing of that matters. And I just from, reading into this and hearing the way that Judge Claudia Wilkin talks about this, like I feel like she is putting very thorough, deep thought into a lot of the intricacies of these topics. And so I think that, she's thinking about a lot of those types of things and how it's going to affect everyone. But, it's impossible to know exactly how it's all going to play out. And like we talked about all in the Stay Woke episode, like people are like coaches are terrified right now, not knowing, being completely out of control of what this world is going to look like. And, yeah, I mean, it really is unprecedented times in college sports, and this ruling is going to dictate everything until we find out whether people play by the rules or not after this ruling.
Kipp, was there something else you want to share there?
I just think that setting a $20 million cap, we can debate whether or not this is right or not. But I just don't think you could tell by the judge response. She doesn't think that this is going to be something that works for kids who are in like first or second grade right now. And I think immediately right off the bat, it's an antitrust violation, because you already know that the schools are going to be they're colluding to limit the play of the players. And I think, she was okay with the idea that college sports could make it if athletes made a little bit of money on the side. This was 2014. It was considered crazy at the time that she thought that might be okay. And now they might finally have access to some of this TV revenue. She seems fine with them making a whole lot of more money than the $5,000 stipend. I think this agreement is going to be a blip in the road. I just don't think that this is going to be the landmark agreement people think it is, because there's just so many legal holes, and it's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
Thinking that players should be capped at a certain amount, or that schools are still paying people separately outside of this agreement. I think that, again, it's a huge moment, but I just think, again, as soon as this thing is agreed to, you're just going to have the lawsuits coming in left and right.
One thing she mentioned too that I did find interesting in all of this, like if this is a 10-year agreement, and to your point, she has concerns about what this looks like for future years. And like that, I read that she had, mentioned the possibility of reconvening every year as part of the agreement to sort of debate what needs to be adjusted for future years, which again, that to Kipp's point, like it's a never ending, battle of what's fair and what's not fair. And I think she brought up the point, like the best way to solve this is probably through collective bargaining, but the process that would be required for that all to be figured out nationally is a whole nother issue that will have to be solved. But I mean, she's right. I believe that like that is the solution to, avoid antitrust violations, is like there has to be collective bargaining in some respect, but the way college sports are designed right now, it's almost impossible for that to take place.
Yeah, fascinated to see what happens next because, again, as complicated as it is, and as much as we have to go to either Google or the dictionary or whatever to try to keep up with everything, I mean, it's going to set the foundation for what college athletics looks like going forward. And to Kip's point, this may just be the start. There may be a lot of lawsuits and a lot of changes to what is decided next, but it is worth keeping an eye on. All right, Georgia men's basketball minute. A lot has happened since the last episode we recorded last Tuesday. Georgia picks up ACC Sixth Man of the Year, Jeremiah Wilkinson from Cal. That's a big addition, a guy that I think has the potential to be Georgia's leading scorer on this upcoming team. A guy from Powder Springs, a guy with a lot of talent. Probably needs to shoot the three ball better. Watching his film, and I did a VIP breakdown of his game, a lot of three-point attempts. And a lot of driving to the basket. Really like the way he plays when he's in the interior. His three-point shooting kind of comes and goes. And you kind of wonder when you look at that Cal team. He had some talent around him, but it was not a team that really contended in their first year in the ACC. So to see how he makes that transition to Georgia and also where he plays, I think he can play the one. He may play the two quite a bit as well. So it will be worth watching, but I think he's a very talented guy, someone to watch going forward. Other news, this has been more so Georgia losing guys. We already knew Silas Demery Jr. was in the portal. He committed to UConn. I think that was last Thursday. A move that I think makes a lot of sense for Silas. Fascinating to see how he gets along with Dan Hurley, because Dan Hurley and Mike White seem like two very different coaches. But, I can't really fault a guy for going to a team that's won two of the last three national titles. I think Silas is going to have a chance to go there and play really well. And he will be a guy I'll be following and see how he plays for the Huskies next season. Savo Drezgic went in the portal on Tuesday. Haven't heard necessarily where he's going, but I would tell people to keep an eye on Arkansas, because I know when Georgia got him to reclassify to join this team, this past team, that John Calipari was hard after Savo trying to get him to flip and go to Arkansas instead. Really talented point guard. I think a guy that would have been Georgia's backup point guard this season had he stuck around. Tough loss, but I don't think anything necessarily to panic about. And the only other note, on Wednesday, I guess that was probably about an hour before we started recording, Asa Newell declared for the draft. Not a surprise at all. This is something that Ace has been upfront about, even going back to the summer when we talked to him. He was asked if he thought he was a one and done player, and he said, yeah, and he's kind of kept that confidence. The thing I pointed out over on the Junkyard is that he'll have the opportunity to come back if he decides to. The deadline is June 15th, so he's got time to go through that draft process. I know Kipp did a story on Wednesday with him. I think he's right now projected to be about the 21st pick. I think that would be lower than he would want, but it's a situation where he can go through this draft process, see where he kind of stacks up, see if he can improve his stock. We see it all the time in the NFL pre-draft process and the NBA as well. So I do not expect Asa Newell to come back to Georgia, but I always say never, because you got to keep in mind what he could make if he came back to Georgia if the draft stock does not make sense. Kipp, what do you make of the latest moves for Georgia basketball and anything you're kind of watching for going forward?
Yeah, I think, well, let me see if the math lines up. They have 3 spots on the roster now.
So right now they have 5, and that is because basketball will get 15 scholarships
Yeah.
under that house settlement. So with ASA, if ASA is indeed gone, they are working with 5 scholarships.
Okay. So as of now, possibly 5. I think, it's huge to see Dylan James and Blue Kane coming back. I think that's big for the team. Um, Looking at the guys they signed, it's pretty clear that Georgia needs to find more impact guards. I think that's I think it common sense, looking not just at what they've lost, but even with what the roster they had, if they brought everyone back, I think you needed, even with Silas Demery, his ability, to kind of put the ball in the basket in huge bursts. You still wanted a distributor, and you still want someone who can be a floor general and not turn the ball over. And they still need that. So I think that's got to be the key for them to find someone who can handle that role for them. And I think, having some of these guys leave, it kind of just makes it a little bit tougher, because I thought Savo was a guy that, maybe with some development could ultimately be a player like that down the road. And now it looks like he will not be. So it makes it a little bit tougher. I don't expect Ace Newell back. I think, again, the 2021 range I still think that's probably his floor. I think with the workouts, he's going to have a chance to get back into the late lottery mix. 6'10" guys that have his kind of motor and are switch defenders and high IQ on offense. I think the only thing holding him back really is the fact that he's a tweener. You don't know if offense is going to progress to where he can play the 4 consistently. He's not going to be a big center. He could be small ball 5, but a lot of teams love that. That is a plug and play role for him. And I do think, you might have a team at the end of the lottery in that 12 to 15 range that might follow up with him during the workout process. So I think, it's pretty clear that he is not going to be coming back to Georgia next season.
Good point, too, pointing out that Blue Kane and Dylan James announced on Tuesday they're coming back. Those are 2 your core guys. They're going to be juniors this upcoming season, Blue especially. Losing Silas was huge, but you had to keep Blue after Silas left, so that was good news on that front. And, to this point, it seems like Santos Surreal is going to stay based on what I've heard. And to me, once you lost Silas, the 2 guys you had to keep were Blue and Sompto. And just based on what I've heard, and I'll point out it's Wednesday afternoon. It could change, but I think that Sompto is going to stay put, and I think that's huge for Georgia going into next season. Ben, what do you think of where Georgia is right now, and anything that sort of stands out to you?
It's all about figuring out which guards Georgia's going to add. I mean, I know that there's some pretty big names from programs that made the NCAA tournament this year that Georgia is in the mix for, trying to bring in as transfer portal additions. We've already seen, the guy from Cal coming in. I think that's step one, but it's not a complete answer of what Georgia needs. To your point, holding on to Sompto is critical at this juncture. You're not going to get anybody that's going to replace what Asa was able to do last year. To Kipp's point, I think he's like a dream world small ball 5 for these NBA teams, because he has a lot of defensive versatility that probably got underappreciated at times this year for just how solid he was there. But also, he can stretch it out and shoot the 3. And so if if he builds on his offensive game, I think he has a chance to, be an NBA player for a long, long time. You're not replacing that this late in the game, because if you were able to replace that guy would be going to the league as well. So I think that they just got to find some guards that can shoot the 3 and defend well. And, again, I don't want to sound like it's a drastic, dire year 4, but this is probably the most important offseason that Mike White has had, and it's probably the one that we have the least comfortable answers around at this exact point in time.
Totally agree, and that's why it's going to be important to follow what happens next. Told some folks over on the Junkyard today that I'm hoping to have a list of people who will be visiting for G-Day on Saturday, and want to kind of take this rough transition. I should have brought this up earlier, Ben, when we were talking about G-Day, but on the football side, what are you watching for as far as visitors? Anything that folks need to know there?
Well, first shout out, national guy Brandon Huffman reported yesterday that Hawaii offensive tackle Malachi Lee is going to be taking his official visit this weekend to Georgia. I always think it's difficult for Georgia to get a big time player like that from Hawaii. A lot of the West Coast schools are going to have some advantages there that Georgia's not. But the fact that you're getting him on an official visit this weekend, I think, is interesting. And, it's a name that you have to include when you're talking about Jackson Cantwell and Kenny Pepe and Ekene Boko and all of these other high-profile offensive tackles that Georgia's recruiting. Like, it's another name that needs to be included in that conversation. I will say that there are probably going to be another official visitor or two, so stay locked into Dogs 24/7 where we'll have more updates on that. There were some names, Rodney Dunham, Ben Boulware, and Javion Osborne, that were all scheduled to be on official visits at one point in time to Georgia this weekend. I don't know that any of those three are actually going to be taking official visits to Georgia this weekend. Malachi Lee is the one that I know of for sure, but I think there's a possibility that there is, one or two others. I will also tease for the folks that are not subscribers, it's a great opportunity to subscribe, that I am expecting positive news for Georgia recruiting. I'll give the hint on the defensive side of the ball sometime between now and when G-Day kicks off on Saturday afternoon. So sometime between now and then, I do expect there to be some positive momentum for Georgia on the recruiting front on defense. And for those subscribers that are super locked in, you'll know before anybody else does.
Again, 50% off at Dogs 24/7 if you want to see what Ben's hinting at. I highly encourage you to go sign up there. All right, transitioning over to Georgia baseball. Pretty tough weekend series for Georgia out in Austin. They got swept by Texas. Again, a very good Texas team, but things did not go quite as Georgia planned. Now, since that series, they beat Presbyterian on Tuesday. I want to say that was 16-2. But our Olivia Sayer recorded a video after that Texas series, sort of breaking down what stood out and what went wrong. And we'll bring on Olivia to talk about the Diamond Dogs and what she took from that series in Texas.
Baseball's 3-game sweep that it suffered at number 5 Texas. So in case you missed it, the Bulldogs lost all 3 games to Texas this weekend. Game 1 on Friday was by a score of 5-1. Game 2 on Saturday was 7-4. And then today's series finale was 4-3. So it was not a good weekend for the Bulldogs, but entering the series, we knew that Texas had a good pitching staff. I believe it was 3rd in the NCAA with an ERA around 3. Only surrendered 14 home runs entering the series, which was largely due to that ballpark. We even saw this weekend that wind can do crazy things, keep a lot of balls in, and then you look, I think Ryan Black hit one that at Foley probably would have gone out in the top of that 10th inning, but with that wall, it did not. And so Georgia's offense was just completely shut down this weekend. And going into it, I didn't expect Georgia's offense to stay on the extreme dominant level we had seen up until this point in the season, but I didn't expect it to be held to 15 hits over 3 games and strike out 38 times. And the biggest thing that stood out to me about the offense is it got behind in a lot of the counts. We've seen when Georgia's offense is at its best, it's scoring in a variety of different ways. It's taking its walks, it's taking its hit by pitches. It actually led the SEC in both categories entering the series. It's getting in those hitters' counts, and then it's making the opposing team throw strikes. And when they throw strikes, Georgia's not missing it. That's not what we saw this weekend. Georgia really didn't foul off that many pitches. I believe it was 5 in game 1, not sure how many in game 2. Got behind in a lot of the counts, and when it got behind, Texas's pitching staff was really just putting it away. And the thing that stood out to me was left-handed breaking pitches. Georgia really seems to struggle with. We saw it on Friday night with Jared Spencer, and then today again with that freshman left-hander that also pitched on Friday night. Georgia struck out, I believe it was 8 times. Yes, 8 times over the final 4 frames against Texas's freshman left-hander, and a lot of that was on those sliders, those curveballs, those breaking pitches. So definitely an area Georgia's offense needs to clean up there. And the other thing that Georgia's offense appeared to do just a little bit, and really the whole team if you look at the entire series, was make the moment bigger than it was. And entering the series, that was one of the things, I believe I even wrote it in my preview story, that Georgia needs to stay within its approach. It needs to not make the moment bigger than it is, and it needs to ignore the 7,000 Longhorn fans that are all rooting for them to fail miserably. That's not really what it did this weekend. You saw it at the plate. It tried to do a little bit too much. You saw it on the base paths with a couple of blunders there. Defensively was definitely not Georgia's best weekend. You look, that error yesterday, unfortunately, by Daniel Jackson in right field really is probably what ended up losing them the game because it just spiraled out of control from there. Today was a lot better defensively. You look at the play that Nolan McCarthy made, the heck of the throw in center field there. You look at Henry Hunter gunning down the runner, trying to steal second. A lot of big plays there, but overall, it was not clean baseball for Georgia. And that's something that Wes Johnson talked about yesterday after Saturday's game. He mentioned that it was not clean baseball, and that's their main goal today. He actually said on the post-game radio show that you can sleep a little bit better knowing you played clean baseball no matter the result. So he's proud that they did that today, but obviously would have liked to come out there with a win. But at least they showed the ability to calm their nerves just a little bit, especially looking at who's coming into Foley Field this weekend, which is Arkansas. That's likely going to be ranked number 1. It'll probably either be Arkansas or Texas on Monday after their absolute demolishing of Missouri, which, granted, is probably the worst team. Not in college baseball, but definitely the worst team in the SEC. So looking at Georgia's pitching staff, it was honestly a pretty good performance for the group this weekend. It gave Georgia a chance to win all 3 games, but the biggest area of improvement that this pitching staff still needs to make is to limit the free passes. And you look at the numbers, Georgia's staff issued 8 free passes on Friday, 7 on Saturday, 7 today, and that is when it's getting beat. It's issuing those walks, issuing those hit by pitches, and then the opposing team's taking advantage and making Georgia's staff really pay for it. You saw it today with Leighton Finley, that hit by pitch and then the home run. You saw it yesterday with Brian Curley, the walk and then the home run, both of which pitched pretty well, by the way. Then you even saw it on Friday night. I believe it was Matthew Hoskins gave up that walk and then that home run. Texas really took advantage of Georgia gifting it base runners on a silver platter this week, and that's really an area that Georgia's going to have to improve upon moving forward, especially looking at, once again, who's coming to town this weekend with Arkansas. But speaking of Arkansas, the Bulldogs will actually welcome Presbyterian to Foley Field on Tuesday for a 3 p.m. first pitch, and Presbyterian isn't off to the greatest of starts this season, but it did win its first Big South regular season title in 2024. And then the big gun comes to town. Arkansas will come to Foley Field for a 3-game series, and the biggest thing about this Arkansas team, last year, very reliant on the pitching, but this year, it can pitch and it can hit. So it should definitely be a good challenge for the Bulldogs. And it should be a fun series, especially with G-Day this weekend and expecting a very big crowd at Foley Field. So yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned, 16-2 over Presbyterian on Tuesday. And then that big series, as Olivia had talked about, in Athens against Arkansas should be an entertaining follow. And again, make sure and follow Olivia on social media and also over on Dogs 24/7 because she does a great job covering Georgia baseball. All right, guys, let's wrap up the episode here with some Masters talk. I know we're all excited to see this thing get underway. Starting on Thursday, it's going to be, I imagine, us up there in the press box. We'll maybe have an extra screen pulled up of what's going on in Augusta. I don't know what Ben's going to do as he's down there on the sideline. He'll get creative, I have no doubt. Maybe have some headphones in listening to what's going on. But let's give some predictions. Give me who you think is going to win the Masters. I'm going to start with you, Ben.
Well, it feels to me like a Rory or Scotty year. I feel like it's shaping up for one of the two big guns or them to be battling it out for one another. But I don't like to be the person that sits up here in a podcast and picks one of the two favorites to win. So I'm not going to do that. But I did have that little preamble just in case that does happen. I can still say that it's shaping up to be one of their 2 years. I'm going to go with the Georgia guy, actually. I think that Sepp Straka is playing unbelievable golf right now. He's top 15th in the world golf rankings. I'm not sure exactly where he is in the FedEx right now, but he's been hanging around the top 5, top 10 all year long, has a win under his belt already this season and has been playing good golf. These Georgia guys, always at least one Georgia guy plays really well this weekend. And so I'm going to go with the hometown kid, Sepp Straka, if you can call Sepp Straka the hometown kid.
I like it. For me, I just am not going to get fooled with the Rory thing. We're not doing this again. Like, he's got to win it before I'm like, yeah, that's going to be my pick. You even saw Ben and I are in a Masters pool. I had the second pick, And I was like, I'm not picking Rory. I'm going to stick with the guy I picked in Xander Schauffele. I just have a really good feeling about how he's been playing, and 7 PGA Tour wins. He's a guy that I think will at least be in the mix. And again, like Ben said, you can't go with the favorite, so I'm going to pick Xander. Kipp, what about you? Who is your pick to win this year's Masters?
I'm going to say I went into this planning to say Justin Thomas because he's got 4 top 10 finishes in the last couple of months. But you guys convinced me it is time. It's Rory's time. This is it. It's got to be his time now. I mean, no, there's no way this isn't it. I mean, he's playing the best golf he's ever played. And if you look back the last 3 years, the players with the most wins during the season has won the Masters. He's got Pebble Beach. He's got the Players' Championship. He's the only player with multiple PGA Tour wins this year. This is it. The time could not be better. There's no way he chokes this. This is it. I cannot see us talking after G-Day about Rory McIlroy choking at the very end and coming up just short of the Grand Slam. I mean, again, there's only 5 other golfers that have done this. I think this is it. And I know that all the pressure's on him, and I know that he knows all the pressure's on him. And sometimes you just kind of that helps you focus because there's nothing else you could think about. You just hone in. And if we'll know probably pretty early on which version of Rory McIlroy we're going to get, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's okay to be playing the best golf, to be favored, to have everyone wondering, is he finally going to do it? And then actually do it. I think it's not now or never, but if not now, when? So I'm going to go with Rory and just let it roll. And I cannot see him disappointing me.
I like the pick. I do agree. Like, it feels like the caliber of golf that he's playing, it's aligning for this to be the year. We talked about this last episode or 2 episodes ago, I guess, about whether picking the all 4 1 seeds to make the Final Four is a courageous pick or not. You could go one way or the other. I feel like Rory's the same way. Like, it feels like picking the favorite to win is not the courageous pick, but I think so many people feel similarly to how Jordan does about Rory, where it's like, I'm just not picking Rory until I see it happen at Augusta or in majors in general, quite frankly, over the last decade. But I'm with you, Kipp. I feel like this is the year. I'm actually going to be rooting for Rory this week. I really hope that he pulls it off.
He's got to be aggressive. He could drive the ball. There's maybe 15 people that can drive the ball like he does, and it plays well in this course. He's got to go out there and be aggressive. And I think this is it. I think he compartmentalizes everything and hones in and makes it happen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm certainly not rooting against Rory. I don't want to get hurt again, guys. I don't want to be like, especially like it'll set up where we'll mention how things are looking Saturday afternoon when we do our post game G-Day show, but going into Sunday, that's just no guarantee. So I really am rooting for Rory to play well, but I am not going to find myself in a spot where, like in that pool that I mentioned with Ben, where I'm like, why did I pick Rory? I will not put myself in that position. All right, we're going to wrap up the episode there. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Let's shout out everybody in the comments too, Pete, John Fork, Sean Von Jovi, and the Munguses. You got to shout out them for hanging around and keeping up with what we got going on here. Go subscribe to Dawgs247.com, of course. Take advantage of that 50% off sale. Again, this G-Day game will not be televised, so you want to follow along. If you're not going to be in Sanford Stadium, the best way to see what's going on is to be on the Junkyard and see our posts and what we are seeing and what stands out to us from the scrimmage. Go to our YouTube, subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Go to our TikTok, a lot of good content, and we will continue to have plenty of content even once spring practice is said and done. So we will wrap it up right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.